Yo, what up? Proverbial boy Jeffy here in Los Angeles at the La Brea Tar Pits, where countless prehistoric animals such as the mammoths you see represented behind me met their demise in the sticky morass of petroleum that we are standing directly in front of. And I think it's fitting, while we're here, that I discuss a mode of communication that predates verbal language. Of course, I'm talking about the facial emotional complex, facial expressions and eye contact. Now, facial expressions and eye contact is one of the three so-called projective modes, the other two being vocal tonality as distinct from verbal meaning, and then of course, kinesthetic mode, which would be body language, touch, proximity, movement through space. And these are all things that contribute to creating a compelling vibe when you're talking to somebody that makes them want to stay around. Facial expression is always there whether you think you're expressing something or not. There's no such thing as a facial non-expression. Even if you're trying to be impassive, other people are going to perceive something. So it makes sense when we're developing an exercise process for total charismatic communication to create a vibe that we would start with the face and then bring the other two into play later. Now, in my experience, and I've been coaching this stuff for 20 years, I think the facial mode has been the one that's typically least consciously exercised. It's the one that's given the least attention, and it kind of makes sense. I mean, I used to think the reason that facial expressions and eye contact, there wasn't a lot of attention paid to that in the teaching community or much interest in it from the students, was because it wasn't sexy, right? It's like, oh, eye contact. It sounds almost like some platitude you'd hear from like Dale Carnegie, how to make friends and influence people, look them in the eyes, smile, stuff like that. But now I've come to believe that it's actually because people are afraid of it. They're actually frightened of it. And if you think about it, we've all heard that old saying, the eyes are the windows to the soul, right? The face is the mode through which we send vulnerable and open messages about what we're feeling and thinking inside. And those messages can seem threatening to the sender, particularly if you're somebody who's been guarded in your communication for your entire life. So like I said, facial mode is the least consciously exercised and the least developed of all the external projective modes. It can operate without the body, it can operate without the voice, and as such, it deserves special attention. And I very often in my programs, I like to begin as the starting point, we begin to work with the facial mode. So the first set of exercises that I do with the face on my mentoring typically deals with the malleability of the facial communicators. And when we're talking about the face and facial expression, there's really two main elements. You have the eye focus process, where you're looking, eye contact, how the eyes are darting around, what that eye movement is revealing about what you're thinking inside and feeling inside. And then secondly, with the musculature of the face surrounding the eyes, which we use to send specific packets of emotional information, so to speak. I could go into this at length, and I do so in my mentoring program. We break this stuff down over a period of 8 weeks, and we get down to the root of facial armoring and stuff like that, and really teach you to diagnose where you might be having difficulty expressing in the face, and then teach you to expand the palette of expressions so you can express whatever you want very precisely and with nuance in interactions to create the precise vibe you want. And that's extremely powerful. Far, far, far more powerful than anything contained in the content that you might say. And I think that people really don't understand that, and that's why I want to put an emphasis on that in this video today. So today, I want to talk to you about the 5 ways that you need to fix your face. Obviously, as a coach, I believe that facial expression is extremely important to being charismatic. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making a video about it, right? But why is it so important? Well, very often, I get clients on my programs who have difficulty reaching what we call the social hook point. And that's when you're trying to meet somebody. That's that point where they go from thinking, who is this person and why are they talking to me, to, okay, this person's cool, let's keep talking to them. That can happen instantaneously, or it can take up to a couple of minutes. But one of the main contributors to that is your vibe. And of course, facial expression is paramount to creating a good vibe, as distinct from verbal meaning. Because I'll get students who have, who are very well versed in so-called conversational technique. They might even be saying the same things that instructors are saying, yet they're not getting the same reaction. And this just goes to show that it's not what you say, it's the vibe you're creating. Is it interesting? Is it compelling? Is it pleasant? Is it welcoming? And facial expression is, again, the base from which, the foundation from which your vibe starts. So what I want to talk about here right now, like I said, I'm going to list the 5 main negative behavior expression characteristics I see in the face that contribute to a bad vibe that gets you a bad result. And the first is as follows. Number 1, a deadpan expression that never changes. So this is essentially what we call facial armoring. And you'll see students go up and their face is literally a blank mask. Like, hey, how's it going? Completely blanked out, and the people are just kind of nonplussed, because when you have this sort of emotionally guarded quality, it sends out a danger signal, right? Your amygdala is always searching for difference, danger, or threat in the environment. And if somebody can't tell what you're feeling inside, that's potentially dangerous to them. So they're like, okay, I don't know if this person wants to kiss me or kill me. Even if the content is interesting and funny, that impassive face is not going to contribute to competing to what's going on in the environment, cutting through their RAS and making you emotionally relevant. So the solution to this is as follows. You want to develop a strongly projective face with emotional states, both positive and negative, easily perceivable to the audience. And again, what we're talking about here is something that we call facial armoring in general. And facial armoring, it's something that you can be made aware of. Coaches can point it out, but it's important to understand that it's going to take persistence to release that. I mean, you're dealing with inhibitions that literally took decades to install in most cases. So it's not realistic to expect that you're going to suddenly drop all the facial armoring and become extremely projective and free and expressive simply because you now intellectually understand it would be beneficial for you to do so. First, you become aware of it, and then you can start the process of letting it go. Okay? Number two is a seeming inability to smile naturally, right? And I see this one a lot. So I'll tell people to smile. I'm like, you need to smile more. And you would be, honestly, you would be shocked how frequently people go up and they think that they're smiling, but they're not. In fact, you are probably doing this to a certain degree. And it's kind of funny because if you watch these videos or if you see me in person when I'm coaching, my attitude is often kind of like brusque. You know, I'm a little bit gruff. I'm kind of like, all right, idiots, here's the information, because I'm trying to convey information in a concise fashion. If you see me out socializing, I'm almost a completely different person. I'm like smiling and laughing the entire time because I'm trying to convey that good, positive emotional feeling. That's a value-giving vibe that draws people in. Look at all your interactions through the lens of, am I A, trying to weasel my way into other people's fun and leech fun off of them? Or am I B, already enjoying myself and then adding that energy to their night or to their day? Am I adding energy to the interactions when I go up to people and introduce myself, or am I asking them to give me energy? So again, this seeming inability to smile naturally, it's far, far more common than you would even think. And sometimes I have to, take a picture of people in interactions to prove it to them because they think they're smiling. And a big part of the work that we do, all of the work we do, involves making you experientially aware of the gap between what you think you're projecting and what's actually being perceived by other people. It's very important that you become, again, experientially aware of that difference between what you think you're projecting and what other people are actually perceiving, and then closing that gap as much as possible. So again, what I'll see very often is I'll tell guys to smile more, and they'll try to smile, but again, they have this, seeming inability to smile naturally, almost like they're the Terminator in T2, where the kid's trying to teach them how to smile, and it's like, it just looks very robotic. Or more likely, what I see a lot is sort of a grimace of pain and shame. Like it's like this very, like they're hiding pain inside. And this is kind of like a variant of what we call it sad face. And that's an acronym, SAD, serious, anxious, deadpan. So they're trying to smile, but it's not conveying warmth and happiness and fun. It's like, this is serious business, S. This interaction is serious business, the ramifications of which will have long-ranging effects and consequences on my life. Too anxious, I hope it works. Oh golly, I hope it works. And then deadpan. What I don't show can't hurt me. So again, they're trying to smile ostensibly to create this fun vibe, but really it's that kind of this rictus mask grimace of pain, shame, seriousness, anxiety, and just generally kind of a deadpan guarding. So what you want to develop to start to address this, on the flip side, the positive characteristic would be not to even necessarily go up and just be grinning like a cheesy psycho, but to develop a readiness right? To develop a facial readiness to express whatever you might want to in the moment, right? And that could be, I can go big if something's funny. I can go judgy. I can go suspicious. I can do whatever I want. So the question becomes, when you're doing any of these exercises, whether it's with the face, the voice, or the body, the question is, can you do whatever you want with either of those modes? Any of those modes, in any combination. And if the answer is no, then the question becomes, why not? So we want to dig into we want to diagnose and pinpoint the inhibition and the mechanisms behind that, because they're not verbalized in your head. You just know that you can't express. So through a variety of exercises, then performance and actual experience, we delve into that. We find out exactly where those inhibitions are being held, and then we can start that process of letting them go, because you don't need them anymore. And in fact, they're counterproductive. They serve to protect you from the judgment of the group at one point. You don't need them anymore. Let them go without shame, without guilt, and then start to replace their manifestations in your life and get to the point where you can express whatever you want. So again, we diagnose, we release, and then we expand the palette so you can do whatever you want with your face. Number 3 is a seeming inability to convey any emotional feeling whatsoever. Now, we've been conditioned from a very young age to be careful with our uses of energy, right? The conditioning of society tells us that emotional energy must be carefully controlled. It must be hidden. The quality of the emotion is not at issue here. It could be happiness, it could be sadness, it could be anger. It must be suppressed. It must be controlled. And this starts from a very young age, from your parents saying, don't yell and scream in the restaurant, right? To sit in class, sit down, shut up. Right, remain silent. It's not polite to talk loud in public, et cetera, et cetera. And look, to a certain extent, decorum comes into play. And yes, you probably shouldn't be just like running around screaming in the movie theater and stuff like that. But the conditioning can go a little bit too far, to the point where any emotion like wants to rear its head, and the first instinct is shut it down. And typically that's shutting it down with physical tension. So what we need to exercise is the connection between inner and outer expression. And again, we want to be introspective about how our mind works and the interference and control patterns that come into play when we feel emotions. So the mind becomes a bridge between inner and outer, as opposed to this judgmental barrier, this judgmental hindrance that prevents you from expressing when you're out. Number 4 is an overly active, nervous face. In other words, darting eyes, any sort of weird held quality that draws attention to itself. And when we're talking about facial expression, eye contact and the eye focus process is a very important element of that. And so many people, myself included, feel often a strong inhibition against making eye contact with somebody that they just met. And what I'll notice a lot of the time is people they'll have an inability to stand directly in front of the people that they're trying to talk to. And they'll kind of stand about 10 degrees off like this. And I always tell these people, look, stand directly in front and square up. Even if I do this to the camera right now, like if I'm talking to you like this versus talking to you like this, you can see there's a bit of a difference there, even through the screen. You're like, okay, this is more engagement. It's more direct. Now, there's already an inhibition against making eye contact due to the vulnerable nature of the eye focus process in the face. Again, we're sending vulnerable and open messages about what we think and feel internally with this mode. So there's already an inhibition to standing in front and looking people in the eyes. And then secondly, say that you have some sort of intention that you want to convey. Let's say that intention is romantic. Now that's an additional wrinkle that causes even more inhibition and shame to come up. The longer that you hold eye contact with somebody, the more pressure is going to be put, or demand is going to be put on the musculature of the face to give it a continued emotional life that makes sense, right? So again, your face, when you're making eye contact with somebody and speaking with them, should have a sense of readiness, aliveness, engagement, anticipation of what they're going to say. Right, as opposed to being this, because if it's just this dead cadence stare, then yeah, that can turn really disturbing really, really quickly. So when I'm talking to somebody, again, the muscles of the face are moving, I'm gesturing, my eye focus process is engaged, it's alive, not nervous and held like I just mentioned, but again, alive, ready, engaged, anticipating, compelled. So last but not least, number 5, aka the final facial fuck up, let's just call it, is little or no communication of what's going on in the mind. And this is somewhat related to what I was just talking about. Again, you're speaking to the person and they you have this sort of impassive mask in the eyes where they can't tell what you're thinking about or what you're feeling. Very emotionally guarded. And because the amygdala is always scanning the environments for difference or threat, if people can't tell what you're thinking while you're speaking to them, that's a major danger signal for a lot of people. And it's very, very off-putting. But again, you're probably unaware of this. So what you want to think about is having a facial expression that's conveying a visualization of what's being talked about in the mind, right? A facial expression and eye focus process that's, again, conveying there's something going on in here. I'm visualizing, I'm thinking, I'm engaged, right? So with the eye focus process, like right now, if my eyes are searching around like this, that would convey that my mind is searching maybe for an answer, right? If I look kind of down, it's more contemplative. Again, you want to be thinking about making your face as clear of a lens as possible between inner and outer, right? But the problems, of course, involved in this are manifest. Like I said, facial armoring is something that most people have to one degree or another. Some people have it really badly. Other people, it's there and it just needs a little bit of work. But like I said, since we don't see our face most of the time, it's hard to tell what we're actually communicating. You can look in a mirror, you can watch yourself on video, and of course it can be helpful to have an external observer like a coach, or even on the mentoring, a whole class tell you, okay, I notice there's facial armoring here. And again, on my programs, I like to convey this information in a very non-judgmental manner rather, so it doesn't trigger defensiveness and rationalization where you defend it as some choice you're making. And look, again, many tension addicts that I know of, particularly older guys, they've spent decades coming up with logical rationalizations of why they behave like this. And these aren't dumb people. And a lot of times these arguments are pretty much airtight. I can't even necessarily argue with them, like, makes sense. But I'm like, look, you came to me as a coach, you came to me for guidance. I've been doing this for 20 years. This is what I notice. I notice you're making a choice to be inexpressive in the facial mode, with your eye contact and facial expressions, and I believe that this is hindering your ability to make connections with people you just meet, and that's why you can't get past social hook point. So again, there's a lot more to this. Again, my 8-week mentoring, we really dig into this over the course of those 2 months, and you'll start to, again, diagnose exactly where you're holding these inhibitions, and then start that process of release and replacing the manifestations of those inhibitions in your life, so you have a wider palette with which to express yourself. And again, you want to expand the palette so it's so wide you could do anything. Not that you're ever necessarily going to approach those limits in interaction, but you want to have the ability to do whatever you want with your face, your voice, and your body, so you can craft the perfect, fun, engaging, compelling, interesting, awesome vibe that makes people want to be around you when you introduce yourself. All right, so food for thought. Again, links in the description if you want to check out those programs. This is Jeffy from the La Brea Tar Pits. Don't sink out there. This program is designed to give you a process to open and sustain charismatic expression with increasing consistency. Remove the obstacles, isolate the skills, exercise them separately, then put them together in a more completely realized whole. How to speak to all the issues surrounding this interrelationship between intuitive and intellectual resources is arguably the most fundamental challenge facing anyone who's attempting to improve their communication skills.
So if you're looking to develop general charisma that you can apply across all areas of life, definitely check out Jeff's Charisma Mastery.